Hello and welcome to Freed Indeed Live. I am your host, Kevin J.N. Hughes, and I am very excited to be joined today by my good friend Sako or
Or
Sarkis,
yeah, whichever you prefer. Sako is
whichever
the
you prefer. And I am super excited because you guys have heard me say over and over again that I'm a monarchist. You've seen me in debates when liberals have said that I'm a fascist, and I've said, no, I'm way further right than that. Or when people have tried to attack me for quote unquote being Republican, and I'm like, hey, don't lump me in with those guys. I'm way further right than them. So Sako and I were talking, and we both feel that I should clarify what the heck I'm saying when I say that. And okay, so you guys have heard lots of my practical things regarding what a monarchist is, how monarchy is supposed to work, why I believe in monarchy. But what you haven't heard is uh things like welfare, taxation, how are these things supposed to work? Biblically speaking, how are we supposed uh to regulate society in this way? I've covered some of this stuff in on Facebook and DeviantArt and other places. I have articles about this stuff, but I've never covered it on the podcast really, and I haven't gone into great detail um really in a long time. So let's dive right in.
also
Um
also
yeah.
don't mind me if I'm eating because I
Yo, no,
haven't.
you're good. You are
No,
good. Eat away, brother.
thanks, man.
Um Of course, we are in the midst of the fasting season. So, do you guys are you guys like the West where you only fast on like Wednesdays and Fridays? Or are
Oh
you
no,
like
no, no.
us where for all of Lent you're fasting?
All of Lent,
Based.
vegan diet.
Based. That's based. All right.
There's some room for flexibility insofar as like, okay, if I like down the street there's a Mexican food place,
Yeah.
so like so once a week, I'll go and like get um a bowl of like rice, beans, onions, and cilantro with salsa, and I'll crush some chips on top of it. Like I know that the beans are like cooked in lard,
Well,
but
right. Yeah.
so little things like that where it's like okay, the lard isn't the primary ingredient. It's not like you're eating an egg omelet or something.
Right. Right.
Like so,
Exactly.
but yeah, other than that, yeah, no meat, no dairy, no egg.
Exactly. Okay. So today we want to talk to you about um, why we believe in uh, how should I put this? How should I put this in a way that people can
What
understand? Uh,
why the Bible will equally piss off both the right and the left in America.
exactly, exactly. So, we're gonna be defending some things that you've probably only ever heard attacked, and we're going to be attacking some things that you've probably often heard defended. So, w I believe firmly that the Bible is against the free market economic system, capitalism, and I believe that the Bible firmly supports um, taxation and welfare. And uh, and there are countries in the modern world that have, with some success, implemented these kinds of things. Poland, I know Poland is kind of controversial, but Poland, for all intents and purposes, is a welfare state, and Poland has been very successful. Um, Now, we are also against communism. We are technically, I'm actually against socialism. Um, so if you're gonna come in the comments and say you're against capitalism, you must be a communist or you must be a socialist. Nope, wrong. That's actually not what I support. But so one thing I should clarify is I'll actually I was gonna start in Deuteronomy, but now that I think about it, I should clarify a little
Oh,
bit.
hold on one
So
second. You keep talking, man. I'm just letting him
yeah, no,
people
you're good.
change the water filter.
You're good. So I should clarify a little bit here. I was gonna, like I said, I was gonna start us in Deuteronomy, but actually I want to go back further. The Bible and God's will for mankind is not being in a modernist sort of country like we live in now. Um, yes, there are lots of good things. There are lots of wonderful things that have been invented. I'm super grateful for indoor plumbing. I'm super grateful for toilets. I'm super grateful for all of these things. But when I say that we were not intended to live in the way that modern people live, I want you to think about um I want you to think about a question here of when people talk about, say, fossil fuels being unsustainable or destructive to the environment, very often well-meaning individuals will say that well, fossil fuels are necessary for human flourishing. What they're leaving out is that fossil fuels are necessary for human flourishing in the way that we live today, but they don't ask the question whether the way that we live today is actually how God intended us to live. So let's look at Genesis 1, verse 26. I'm going to skip around in Genesis 1 and 2, but I'll let you guys know what verses I'm in. So Genesis 1:26. Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of heaven, and the cattle, and over the earth, and over every creeping thing that moves on the earth. And so God made man in the image of God. He made him male and female, he made them. Then God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of heaven, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And then God said, I have given you every seed-bearing herb that sows seed on the face of the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed, and it shall be to you for food. I have given you every green plant as food, and all the wild animals of the earth, and all the birds of heaven, and everything that creeps on the earth, in which is the breath of life. And it was so. And then he saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. And evening and morning were the sixth day. And then after that, we see the Sabbath. I'm not gonna read the whole chapter, like I said, but I want you guys to think about what kind of life Adam and Eve have before the fall, because that's what God intended creation to look like. So when we ask questions about like, well, is capitalism better, socialism better, is monarchy? The question is, what did God want human society to look like before the fall? And then from that, our goal should be trying to build that on Earth. We can't approximate it perfectly because we live after the fall, but this is what Christian society attempts to do is return to Eden. So, okay, let's skip forward a little bit here because we don't have all day, but uh then the Genesis 2, God plants a garden eastward in Eden, and he puts the man that he had formed there, and then he makes the trees, and then verse 15. Then he took the man he had formed in in the garden to tend and keep it, and the Lord God commanded Adam, saying, you may oh no, wait. I wanted to Actually, I'm skipping down to verse 18. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Was a couple verses off. And the Lord God said, it is not good for man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable to him. And God formed out of the ground all the wild animals of the field, all the birds of heaven, and brought them to Adam to see what he would call them. Now, notice it does not say to see if they would be a helper for him. It says to see what he would call them. That's going to be very important in a second. Thus, whatever Adam called the living creature, that was its name. So Adam gave names to the cattle, the birds, and all the wild animals. But for Adam there was not found a helper suitable. Then God put a trance upon Adam, and he slept, and took one of his ribs and filled up the flesh in its place. And the Lord built the rib and made from Adam a woman and brought her to him. And Adam said, "This is now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man." So, you guys have heard me talk about the patriarchy. You've heard me discuss what this passage means for the roles of men and women, but that's actually not exactly what I'm talking about here. We can talk about that a little bit, but here what I'm really focused on is just the general principle that God put human beings, He gave us dominion over the earth, told us to subdue and multiply it, told us to cultivate the earth. So we were farmers, gardeners, and nurturers of the earth. And he creates the man and the woman to do this task. Now, human beings sinned and fell, but we can see a couple of things right off the bat about what God intended human society to look like when he created us. We fell from that, but what did God want our society to look like? We see right there in Genesis that human beings were supposed to be agrarian, filling the earth and and bringing order to the earth, but doing so in a way that nurtured the earth, not in a way that destroyed it. We weren't supposed to have 15-lane highways. We weren't supposed to have neighborhoods with, lawns that are bad for the earth. This is not the way that God created the earth. God wanted us to live in an agrarian economy and and that's very important because in an agrarian economy, you grow the food that you're going to eat. We were not designed to be in a globalist economy where we grow food to export it to other countries and sell it to other people. All of these sort of capitalist tendencies are actually very modern and are actually not what God intended creation to look like. So I want to put that out there right off the bat because I'm going to be completely honest with you and just say that everything Sako and I are about to advocate for does not work in a modern economy. So if you want to come in my comment section and say, "Well, that doesn't work. Such and such country has tried this and that and it doesn't work." You're right, but that doesn't mean it isn't righteous. And the reason it's not working is because we're trying to implement part of God's will without having the whole of God's will. So I want to head those arguments off at the pass. And for those who want to say, well, what you're advocating has never been tried, actually, it was tried for thousands of years, worked really well, and then was destroyed by modernists.
Yeah.
So it did work in all of the countries where it was implemented. Our system of government worked, and then it was destroyed by the Enlightenment. It was destroyed by the advent of modern capitalist systems and socialist systems, and was essentially put out of circulation. But it did work, and it worked for over 1,000 years, and it
Oh,
was
hold on
glorious.
one second. You keep talking. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. You're good. So, okay, with that in mind, I just wanted to get that out of the way. Like I said, I wanted to get that out of the way right off the bat so that we can head off all of these arguments that I already know we're going to get. So what we're advocating is part of a larger system of radical change that we believe is necessary based on the Bible. So with that said, okay, now to our topic of I can finally cover our actual topic of our show today, which is what we're broadly calling the welfare state. So Deuteronomy 15:5 says, "Only if you carefully obey the voice of the Lord your God to observe with care all these commandments that I command you today, for the Lord your God." Oh, sorry. Uh, I'm actually going to start in verse 3. You may demand it back from a foreigner, but you shall grant remission on your brother's debt, except when there may be no poor among you, for the Lord your God will greatly bless you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess for an inhabitant, only if you carefully obey the voice of the Lord your God to observe with care all these commandments that I have given you today. So, what is a Christian society supposed to look like? A Christian society, we we are not to have people. Debt is not a Christian concept. Usury is not a Christian concept. In fact, the New Testament expressly forbids usury. St. Paul compares usury to homosexuality. So all of these bankers who are making millions of dollars off of having you in debt, St. Paul sees them as sodomites. That's how everything we say about like homosexuality is wrong and all this. Well, guess what? So is having people in debt. That's
Yeah.
literally an equal sin in God's sight. So a debt economy, not righteous. What is righteous is that there be no poor among you. How do we have a society with no poor among us? Well, you're not gonna like you're not gonna like the answer, because the answer is tied up into the tithe. And by the way, the tithe in the Old Testament was more than 10%. The way that Christians have come up with the 10% figure is by factoring only the things that weren't related to the Israelite tax system. But the Israelite tax system was actually one comprehensive whole, and it was actually about 26%. If you want to get
Damn.
really technical on what all the tithe was, it would be about 26% of everything you owned that you were giving to the Levitical system and the government to be redistributed to the poor and to so it is a welfare state. I'm sorry, but it is. Um so Here's some examples on the tithe. Genesis 14:20, Abraham gave Melchizedek a tenth of everything he possessed. Leviticus 27:30 to 32, give a tithe of everything from the land, for this belongs to the Lord and is holy to the Lord. Tithes were given to the Levites for their service, a tenth of the land to the Lord, a tenth of all that your fields produce. Bring unto the Lord the whole tithe into the storehouse. Test me in this, Malachi 3:10. And then in the New Testament, we see that a lot of this, like I said, gets subsumed into taxation. Jesus tells us to pay our taxes. But that doesn't completely eliminate the concept of the tithe, and that's where the whole 10% figure comes in. But okay, so we've covered some of that stuff now. Another concept that I wanted to hit us with really quick was the concept of the Jubilee, from Leviticus 25, 8 through 55. So,
Right.
the Jubilee is an interesting concept. I'm not going to read Leviticus 25, 8 through 55 for the interest of time. You can read it yourself. But if you pay close attention to the Jubilee, what's going on there? Well, every 50 years, everybody's debt in all of Israel is supposed to be forgiven. Every 50 years, even if you've sold yourself into slavery, you're supposed to be able to be redeemed out of that on the year of Jubilee. And everything gets reset. So, so again, I'm going to be controversial here, but if we really believe that this is God's will, then why are we fighting with people about student loan debt?
Hmm.
Why are we fighting with people about credit card debt? Why are we fighting with people about these things? Debt economies are not what God wants the world to be like. Again, this can't work in a system like we've built now because you can't just forgive the debts of an entire country if your economy is built on debt. But if you live in an agrarian economy with a monarchist form of government, then yeah, you can just forgive all debts all at once because the economy isn't rooted in debt. That's actually this is why Christians like me advocate for a complete return to tradition. And by complete, I mean including political return to tradition. And this is why I'm against everything from fascism to republicanism to democracy, because all of these, and by extension, the free market economy, because all of these things are a symptom of a modern age that is corrupt, depraved, and built on crushing you, the consumer. And I'm using that term carefully because I don't see you as a consumer. The modern economy sees you as a consumer. I see you as an image bearer of God, and I believe our economics systems should also see you as an image bearer of God.
Right.
Before before we hopped on and started recording, Sako and I were talking about one implication of this, and I'll let him kind of take it away in a moment because I've been talking for a while. But um, one implication of this that Sako pointed out before we hopped on was the idea of women and okay, what do like maternity? Okay, how do we deal with maternity in and its role in the economy? How do we deal with the fact of, okay, we're both against abortion. We see abortion as a grievous sin. And people ask me things like, well, if you're against abortion, what about after the child is born? I completely agree. That's why I believe that mothers should be able to stay home and actually raise their babies. And that's why I believe that the state should provide for mothers to be able to do that. Um, I had an article up, but I think I knocked it down accidentally because I was going to bring it up today in as part of this actually, but I don't know if you saw Sako, but Russia recently passed a new law that mothers who have a certain amount of children, I think it was like 6 kids or 7 kids or something. It was a high amount, I'll grant,
Mm.
but the state will actually pay you now to have more kids. And now they're doing this to try to have more little Russian babies and revitalize their population. But I actually see this as very righteous. This is what God's economy looks like. This is what it's supposed to look like. Women are supposed to be supported by the social structure. Women are supposed to be able to have big families and men too, but we're supposed to be working and women, working outside of the home, and then women are supposed to be able to actually provide a life for their kids, and the state should be helping to bolster this up.
Right.
Um, there is an inherent dignity to child bearing and rearing, and an inherent good that this provides for the state, for the people, the population, and this should be supported. Monarchist societies, for all of the faults of various monarchs, for all of the faults of various ways that this might have been implemented, did do this. Now, so I'm going to be further than the current Russian government. I don't think that we should start doing this when a woman has however many kids. I think we should start doing it from kid number one. Every single
Exactly.
every single woman out there, every single mother out there, well, every mother out there, not just single mothers, sorry. I want to be very clear. Every mother out there should be able to count on the social structure to lift her up and enable her to be the best possible mother for her kids. And you
Yeah.
might say, well, that system is going to get abused, blah, blah, blah. It's not being abused because that mother is taking advantage of the system. That's what the system is there for. That's what God wants, is for
Right.
her to be able to stay home and actually care for her kids. So,
And-
Sako, like I said, I've been going for a while. I hit us with a whole bunch of Bible verses. I hit us with a whole bunch of concepts.
Yeah.
And hopefully it's at least convincing enough that somebody can sort of process what I'm saying. But
Yeah.
I want you to jump in here. I want you to share perspective. I want you to share biblical wisdom here. You know what? You even push back. You can push back against what I'm saying and
Yeah,
be like, "Hey, what about these?" Just I want you to hop in.
for sure. Yeah. So before I address, before I sort of elaborate on the other points, I'll sort of continue on what you were saying about women. Um, I'm someone who is very much in favor of laws that protect women, protect them from
Hmm.
domestic violence, protect them from like any sort of unjust treatment. And the controversial reason for that among feminists is because whether we're talking like if we're talking just in terms of pure biology, women are the
Hmm.
weaker sex. So so this so it's like, okay, we can all start from like a standpoint, like an egalitarian standpoint of like, okay, everyone needs to be protected under the law and stuff, but I go even further. Women need to be protected even more because they're the weaker sex.
That's
um
right.
like this One of the things that I sort of detest about modern feminism is that it sort of plays the, oh, we're, women need to be protected uh when it's convenient, but then when it's
Right.
not convenient, it's like, oh, it's essentially saying like, we want all the protections you have and then some.
Right. Well,
It's like,
they want to have their cake and eat it too, because they want, to be like anything you can do, I can do better. But then they're also like, no, you have to protect me from I need protection from all the scary men out there, but also anything you can do, I can do better. Well, which is it?
right. So, right. And it's like, and I look at things in terms of like a hierarchy, right? The people who are most vulnerable need the most protection.
That's
So
right.
in children, the poor, etc. So it's like children need the most protection because they're both physically weaker and mentally they're not developed. Women, need less protection than children, uh, because they're adults mentally,
Right.
but they're physically weaker. Men still need to be protected under the law because we're victims of injustice, but we generally need the least
Right.
protection because we're both mentally adults and physically stronger. There's like a hierarchy to these things, and the same is true for classes. Like, people who are people who are in poverty, especially under tremendous debt, need more protection than somebody who's living in a multi-million-dollar mansion.
Right.
So the whole ethos of biblical compassion, of biblical society, is protecting those who need the most protection,
Exactly.
because in ancient pagan societies that wasn't the ethos. I'm not saying it was completely like dog eat dog. Like, there were, if you read the codes of Hammurabi and certain things, there were some skeletons of some basic
Right.
laws for the poor, like certain limitations on debt, slavery, things like that, but nothing nothing approaching the comprehensibility of the Torah, for
Right,
example.
exactly. The people talk about the code of Hammurabi, but the Torah goes way further than Hammurabi's code because, like, in Hammurabi's code, it's like if your friend pokes out your daughter's eye, you can go poke out his daughter's eye. If your friend, stabs your slave, you can stab his slave. But in reality, the Bible goes even further and says, no, if your friend pokes out your daughter's eye, your daughter can go poke out his eye. Like there's this sort of it brings it up to a level of like, no, everybody is kind of on this playing field. Everybody has this footing, and like you said, it gives a higher level of protection to those in the most vulnerable positions. And you mentioned women being the weaker vessel and therefore needing more protection. Um, it's interesting that one thing I've been actually looking at a lot this week is when we talk about this protection, I want to go a step further than maybe most people have heard before. So I think a lot of people are tracking with you on protection in that they're like, yeah, yeah, women should have more like protection, women should have more ability, like physical protection from harm, than men because blah blah blah. But we're not just talking about like the cops should be there to protect a woman from getting, attacked by a serial killer or something. That's not all we mean by protection. I'm gonna share with you guys some science really quick that backs up what Sako was just saying. So a lot of people don't know this, but the male cycle, the male circadian cycle, if you will, is a 24-hour cycle. We recharge and put forth new, like our cycle works in 24-hour increments. Um, a woman's cycle works on a 28-day increment. It's a monthly cycle. Um, Now everybody knows that to some degree, right? Everybody knows that women have a menstrual cycle, that they are there are certain times during the month where women are fertile and able to reproduce, and certain times of the month where they're not. There's certain times of the month where women get kind of put out of commission, to some degree at least, and their hormones are put in a certain way.
Mhm.
But people don't think about this in terms of protection and work and the sort of financial livability, the sustainability of things like women in the workforce. Women in the workforce doesn't make any sense because the workforce is not on a monthly cycle. The workforce is on a day-to-day cycle, at most a weekly cycle, but not a monthly cycle. And it can't be. It can't function that way. Whether you're out in the fields or whether you're in an office, either way, it cannot function on that level, which is why when man fell, God told the man, your curse is that you are going to have hard labor. And he told the woman, your curse is that you're going to have hard childbearing. We have different curses because we have different roles in society and different and then he said part of the curse was that you will desire the place of your husband, or it's usually translated you will desire your husband. That actually means you'll desire the place of your husband. So feminism is part of the curse, which is why I'm not angry at. This is why I'm not angry at feminists. Like God cursed us with the fact that we have to deal with blue-haired feminists who hate us. Like that's just part of the curse. So, um,
Right.
so I get it. But this is part. So when Sako said women need more protection, he's not just talking about physical danger kind of protection. He's talking about a comprehensive societal protection that if we live in a society that's able to do this, then the way society should be structured is in such a way that women are actually provided and cared for, and that women are actually made able not to be part of the rat race, so to speak. Women should not be um, having this thrust on them. We should actually honor that 28-day cycle that God has created women with. Women's cycle follows kind of the same rhythm as the moon, and that's why in ancient societies you always see women being associated with the moon. And there's this sort of lunar imagery always around women. You even see this with the Virgin Mary, you see her like in the Book of Revelation, she's on the moon. Um,
Oh, the moon under her feet, right?
Exactly, that she's standing on the moon giving birth to Christ.
Yeah.
So even in our own, sort of our own symbolism has this comprehensive thing. And this is all representative of the fact that women are on a different cycle. Their menstrual cycle is different. different from our circadian cycle, and that's not a bad thing. Part of my issue with feminism is that it tries to make all this stuff bad. It's like, oh, how dare you say this? Why? This isn't an insult. It's part of what makes women not men, and that's perfectly fine and good. Um, we need women to be women. Like, society doesn't work if everybody has to fulfill
Yeah.
one role. Society works the same way as a body works. A body doesn't work if everything is an eye or a tongue. The body works when every part of the body is fulfilling its own role in the way that it's supposed to be fulfilled. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
and
we
if
are
this is
all for women having full protection that is due to them as the weaker vessel, including the sort of structural and financial protection that women need that men don't need as much.
right, and and then even also spiritually speaking in the church, like
That's
some
right.
point out some of the canon laws that say like during that time of the month a woman can't get the Eucharist. What a lot of people don't know or either like are selective about is the fact that if you're a guy and you had a wet dream the night before,
Right.
you can't have the Eucharist either.
That's right.
So so if you're a guy that sort of has wet dreams often, you're kind of screwed.
That's
like,
right.
like because
Exactly.
I can't remember. Okay, I think church canons might vary. I can't remember what it is for you guys, but like, what is it like a week or 2 weeks? You can't take the Eucharist.
Yes. Yeah, there's like I think it's a week. Although if you show up for confession, you can get it absolved and then come in, but like if you um
Mhm.
yeah. Yeah, if you do that like the night before, then you're screwed and you just aren't going to be able to receive communion. Um but also women are exempt from fasting. A lot of people don't know this, but if you've recently had children, if you're pregnant or nursing or in any kind of vulnerable situation like that, you're exempt from the fast. So women
Yeah,
actually spend significantly less of their life fasting than men do in
yeah,
the Orthodox Church, which I think is kind of based. It's just like I was talking to a woman yesterday and she sent me an email and she was like, "I'm thinking about joining Orthodoxy, but I'm concerned about the fast because of all this." And I said, "You're not going to be required to fast with all these concerns because you're going to be exempted from the fasting just by virtue of the fact that you're a woman and you've got, you've got a big family, so I know that you're going to keep having more kids and stuff and you're going to be exempt. So don't worry about it." Like,
right. It's like for um to him who's it's almost like the stronger you are, the more is
right.
expected of you. So it's like and then another thing. Okay, so here's where I could sort of see a little bit of the feminist eyebrows begin to wrinkle, and here is where I'm gonna sort of um allay some, hopefully try to allay some of that, but also get under the skin of some of the base red pill dude bros.
Oh, I get under their skin all the time. Let's have fun with that now.
Yeah. So so the feminist thing, because the whole
I'm just gonna say
feminist
right now, I hate
ethos,
the whole red pill thing. I think it's one of the dumbest things that's ever been created. So we'll just
it's a pathetic substitute for a real genuine lack.
exactly,
Like there's
yes.
but so sort of the Andrew Tate version of masculinity that's being peddled today to men is very much. It's funny for all his talk of the Matrix and escaping the Matrix. Tate is basically its spokesperson because what does Andrew Tate's lifestyle entail? buying expensive,
Exactly. He's like a
buying,
total hedonist.
yeah, buying expensive cars, getting lots of women, living a lavish lifestyle. If you're in a company, I don't know, like maybe climbing the corporate ladder or like starting your own company. It's like, and this is important for me because one of the feminist retorts is like, okay, but if you're a guy, like if you're a woman, you're pigeonholed into doing this one thing or these couple things. But if you're a guy, you can be you can be a CEO, you can be a scientist, you can be like an entrepreneur, do all these exciting things. And sorry, guys, men shouldn't be doing those. Okay, except for maybe like a scientist. But other than that, men shouldn't be doing those things either.
That's right.
Like, I'm not just saying like, oh, women shouldn't, be ambitious to get cars and money and all these things. Men shouldn't either. If you're a man, you're like your aspiration should be like making enough to take care of yourself and your family. And if you make a bit extra, then good. I'm not saying you can't have any luxuries, but the pursuit of luxury as its own good
That's right.
is a sin. Like,
Exactly. Jesus had far, far more to say against the rich than ever against the poor. That's
yeah.
just a fact.
So right. So it's like, so I'm not here saying like, oh, if you're a woman, you should essentially be a baby factory. Meanwhile, guys get out there and climb the corporate ladder and like run the rat race. No, guys shouldn't either.
That's
So
right.
so so if I'm saying like women, you know, what is best for women to like stay home, take care of the kids, yada yada yada. It's best for men to stay home, take care of the kids, the home, do yard work, do like, get a remote job if possible.
That's
Like
right.
one of the things that I sort of and I'm not a luddite here. I love technology when it's used for good. And one of the goods that I've seen emerging with remote work, one of the goods coming out of COVID is remote work.
That's right.
Is it allows men to be at home with their families, which has been the case for much of human history.
That's right.
This this whole this all the people that call themselves uber traditionalists would say like, oh, the man should go out, bring home the bacon, come home at the end of the day to like a home cooked meal or whatever. It's like that's a post-industrial revolution concept of masculinity. The closest thing to that would be, going out in the beginning of the day to work in the
That's
fields or
right.
to, maybe take some goods down to the market in town to sell or whatever, and then come home at the
That's
end of the
right.
day. But even then, if your children as soon as your children were old enough, if they were boys, right? The father would take them out into the fields with him, or he would take them down into town to the market to sell goods or
That's
buy
right.
goods. Like dad would be at home with the kids and spend most of the
Yes.
day at least with the boys.
Fathers were very, and yes, in the ancient world, fathers were very involved. And I'm going to go a step further and say that this is another reason why agrarian society is what God wants for us, because you also get, yes, at the height of the year, you have an 8-hour workday in an agrarian society, because at the height of harvest time you need to be 8 hours of, you're putting in a full day, 8 to 10 hours of labor to harvest and prepare and cultivate. But for most of the year, people did not. This is actually something that a lot of people don't know, but in like the before the modern age, for most of the year, people did not work 8-hour shifts. For most of the year, you worked about 4 hours, and and for large chunks of the year, you actually would be working very little. Like during the winter time, there wasn't really a lot you could do because you've already cultivated the earth, you've already tilled the soil, you've already done these things, and you can't grow anything during this time, so you're mostly there's not a lot that you can actually do. Um, and this is one of the reasons why so many holidays, so many festal days happen during this time of the year because people needed something to do. So you get
Yeah,
together as a
as
family.
that old saying goes, idle hands are the devil's playthings.
That's right, exactly. And then also this created a lot more time for what's called leisure, and people misunderstand. In the modern world, we use the word leisure as like playtime. That's actually not what ancient people thought of when they thought of leisure. So, when ancient people talk about leisure time, they're talking about going to church. They're talking about um, study of the scriptures. If you could read, you'd do personal study of the scripture, but most people couldn't read back then, so they would go to church and be taught the scriptures. But they were in church all the time. Like ancient people knew the Bible way better than modern people do, even though we can read and they couldn't because they had it memorized because they were in church all the time hearing it. Like I know less of the Bible than a medieval peasant, even though I have studied it my whole life, because he was in church all the time hearing it and singing it back to God in a way that I don't. Not in the West because they were idiots who put everything into Latin so that normal people couldn't understand it, but the
Although I
base
will give
rose
Catholics
over in
their due.
yeah.
Um, you know, a lot of like there was like a Gothic Bible that
Hmm.
was printed for the Goths, and then sorry, not printed, but like made for the Goths, and they did
Right.
do some vernacular Bibles. Like there's like an old German one, I
Oh
believe.
yeah. The
So
idea that they like didn't allow anybody to have the Bible is totally just a Protestant myth, but yeah, the whole Latin only thing is still dumb,
yeah,
um but you're right that it gets overplayed. So I'm not trying to participate in that, but my point is that based rows in Russia and Armenia and stuff always had access to the fullness of tradition being constantly brought to them. And this is something that you have access to when you live in an agrarian society because like these people were able to go to church every day because you'd go to church and then you'd go out into the field and work and for however long and then you'd go home and like I said for most of the year you're home like you spend way more time with your family. Fathers were way more involved than they are in the modern world. So I completely agree with you. If you can work from home, you should work from home, even if it means making a little bit less money. Work from home, do it, and supplement your income with, with things on the side, like an Etsy store or something. Don't uh, but don't forsake your family for 8 hours a day. More than that, really, because you have your commute to and from work and all these things. So don't do that if you can avoid it. If you can't avoid it, then I understand, and my heart goes out to you. But the
yeah.
love of money is the root of all evil. Don't fall for the lie of capitalism. It is better to be poor with much spiritual blessing than it is to be rich and lost for all intents
Which
and purposes.
right, and this brings me to the next point that I was gonna raise, which is the city.
Ooh, here we go.
um, so for those who are attentive to the narrative in the early chapters of Genesis, right? Um, the first city is also. I don't think it's a coincidence that the first city is established by the first murderer.
That's right.
Cain, Cain is more or less given credit for like the founder of urban society,
That's right.
um, and his descendants, with no lack of contribution from the Watchers, also
That's right.
prematurely invented a lot of advanced technologies. Now, it is unfortunate that now, okay, before I get to that, when you read a lot of pagan literature um, that has these themes, right? It's very Promethean in nature. In other words, the sort of Prometheus figure or figures that give mankind the technology, usually in opposition to another set of gods,
Right.
are sort of painted as like the heroes who like risked it all for humanity and gave humanity technology so they could move ahead and suffered the ultimate penalty for it or whatever. Uh, so, for example, in ancient Greece, even though humans reverently worshipped Zeus, don't know why, but they did. But but even though they did,
Well, they
uh,
worshipped him because they were afraid of him
right, right.
primarily.
They also I gotta find where some like the source for this, but I remember reading somewhere that there were also in temples intercessory prayers on behalf of Prometheus for him to be released.
That's right.
So like all the humans of the world were praying for Zeus to release Prometheus because they loved him and for giving them the technology, even
That's
though
right.
some of that was technology to destroy themselves.
Well, but they didn't see it that way. They
Right,
saw
right.
it as because in other than the Israelite people, most societies saw like empire build imperialism as a good thing. It was only really, which to
Yeah,
be fair, okay, I'll be generous here a little bit and say that yes, the Roman Empire did make the world a better place. The Pax Romana was a good thing. The if you had to live in the ancient world most of the ancient world was a pretty brutal, unforgiving place. If you had to live under those conditions, living under the Roman Empire actually was a lot better than not living under the Roman Empire for most of the people who lived in it. So, like, to be honest, yes, to a certain extent, imperialism was a good thing, but the reason imperialism exists is still a bad thing. It's exactly what Sako was just saying. Genesis 10, God gives the world over to the gods, and then this creates a situation where people are imperialists and going out and sort of advancing their own empires and building their own
yeah.
glory. Um,
I will push back a little bit on the Roman Empire thing. The At least when it comes to societies, right? Between the two empires, I'm on Team Persia. I'm on Team Iran. Like I'm a huge obviously prior to the plague of the Arabian death cult. Uh,
right.
I'm a big fanboy of pre-Islamic Iran.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
And in many ways, the Persian empires prior to Islam were more just than the Roman Empire. Like,
Yeah. So the Persian Empire, a lot of people think so one of the things that I hate about the movie 300 is that it's like well the Greeks are super based and the Persians were super evil and it
like
totally ignores the fact that Spartan society was completely made possible by slavery. Um,
yeah,
and like a really bizarre kind of slavery too, where like slaves were not at all like talk about unequal society. It's like part of your training in the Agoge school in order to become a Spartan warrior, you had to kill some random slave. Like
yeah.
so bizarre. Like just super
They
messed
basically
up.
kept an entire class of people in abject terror. Like,
Exactly. And meanwhile, comparatively, the Persian society was nothing like that. Yes, King Xerxes was a dick. Yes, he did some really horrible stuff. But
But
like
yeah,
that,
overall, like, and if you study the Zoroastrian religion, right? Um, compare the the sort of Greek societies with their
right,
capricious gods, right? With the Zoroastrian society that believes in a morally good God with a morally good order that
right.
demands this protection of the less fortunate. Like if I wasn't Christian, I would be Zoroastrian.
Yeah.
Easily.
Well, I mean, you
Um,
wouldn't be allowed to be because they don't accept converts, but I get what you mean.
that's only the ones in India. The Iranian ones do.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. A lot of people don't. Yes, and the communities here in America are mostly Iranian, so they take converts. But but yeah, like
Okay, well,
even
I've always said that if I wasn't a Christian, I'd be Shinto, but now that I know that, I
eh,
guess if I wasn't a Christian, I'd be Zoroastrian. I say that the reason why I say Shinto is because, just to clarify that, Shintoism is the only religion other than Shintoism, Hinduism, and Orthodox Christianity are the only three religions remaining in the world that are actually traditional religions, like that have handed down their tradition from ancient
yeah,
times to now with any kind of succession. I realized Shintoism had a weird stint there in World War II, but like for the most part,
right.
Shintoism has had like a consistent thing, and I just really don't like Hinduism, so I couldn't be a part of that. I just find their mythology to be really disturbing, if I'm honest. But Shintoism is something that. So now I would never not be a Christian, but like if you somehow proved that Jesus is in fact still dead, if you somehow proved that the resurrection never happened, then I couldn't be an atheist, so I would probably be a Shinto. Although now that I know that about Zoroastrianism, I'm rethinking that. But fortunately, this is irrelevant because
Yeah,
because thank God, Jesus is risen, and I don't have to be a pagan.
right.
But you're right, Zoroastrianism is pretty based compared to other pagan systems.
Yeah, exactly. And even more like sort of focused on morality and justice than Hinduism. So
Right.
like the and it's sort of reflected in the Persian Empire. Like, so for example, the Persian empires had slavery, but it wasn't sort of like the backbone of the economy in the way that it
Right.
was in the empire. And the Persians were the first people to sort of experiment with trying to pay like workers in wages, like
Yeah.
in and not just men but women. Believe it or not, like there are actually some tablets that have records of wages paid to skilled female artisans. So yeah, if I were living at that time, I would much rather be in the Persian Empire than the Roman Empire, and that's also part of my bias a little bit, maybe because the Armenian civilization was very closely intertwined with the Persian one. So
Yeah. I wasn't gonna call you on it, but I was thinking like bro is Armenian, of course he loves Persia.
although to be fair, we also have a pretty long, chill history with the Greeks as well. So
That is true.
we're like, if you ask us, like, to pick, like, as a group, to pick between the Greeks and the Persians in ancient history, we really couldn't pick.
Right?
um,
Uh
but sorry, we went off on a tangent there.
no,
My
we
bad.
did, but it was a
But
fun tangent, so you're
yeah,
good.
but yeah. So getting back to the whole imperialism thing, yeah. So the Hebrew Bible sort of reverses this whole Promethean narrative, turns it on its head by saying, no, the technology that was given by the gods, air quotes,
Hmm.
was not a net good. It was a net evil, because the things that were the things that were taught are not evil in and of themselves,
Right.
except for maybe the sorcery stuff. But like, certain forms of agriculture, certain forms of like metallurgy and all that, Metallurgy isn't bad if you're making a plow, but it's bad if you make a sword and
That's
you
right.
kill somebody with it. So
My favorite analogy for this is nuclear power. A lot of people don't know this, but nuclear power is the best way, the most comprehensive way to have clean energy would actually be for us to switch to nuclear. That's the best possible way for us to stop using fossil fuels is to switch to nuclear. People have no idea, but that's just honestly true. And Elon Musk has even proved that you could conceivably, with just 100 nuclear power plants strategically placed, completely change the grid. Um, I'm not a big Elon Musk fan. It just so happens that he's the one who proved this. So nuclear power is the best form of energy that exists and could completely change the economy, could completely change our society, could completely change our relationship to
yeah,
the environment. And there is very little investment in nuclear power compared to other forms of power. Why? Because when we discovered nuclear power, the first thing we did with it was wipe two cities off the map.
yeah, yeah.
Like nuclear power is the greatest thing ever, but we made a bomb out of it.
Out of it and killed hundreds of thousands of people. You're right.
So,
So
like,
it's like, when you take a bunch of like when you take a bunch of fallen humans, especially
mhm,
primitive fallen humans, and teach them how to make like steel implements and and especially sharp steel instruments.
right.
What are one of the first things they're going to think of? Oh, I can hit slash cut someone with this.
That's
um,
right.
and or like when you teach women, like the arts of aesthetics, right? Like makeup and all that.
Mhm,
What's one of the first things that are gonna come to mind? Oh, how can I use this to like seduce a man, like get
right.
whatever man I want, right? So it's like,
Yep.
um, so the Bible realizes this. So instead of sort of glorifying this age of like civilizational development as some sort of golden age, as so many pagan myths do, it paints it as what it is, corruption and degradation of human society.
Exactly.
Now, with that in mind, the things that these watchers revealed to mankind were like heavenly knowledge. Like, they weren't getting it out of nowhere. They knew these things because they were in proximity to God, right? So, like,
Right.
they knew how to molecularly, even at a molecular level, um, they knew how to smelt metal. They knew how to, they knew
Right.
techniques of how to like stimulate, like how to use the soil in order to produce larger crop yields and all these things. Because this is all science, and all science belongs to God, because it's essentially the study of creation, right? So it's forbidden knowledge, but it's forbidden knowledge that has ultimately its source in God. Uh, so the knowledge itself, even to be fair, even the sorcery, right? Like even sorcery is sort of a corruption of liturgics. Like it's like nothing
Yeah.
is inherently evil because evil has no existence. Evil is a privation.
Exactly.
So even sorcery is a corruption of something good misapplied or misused.
Exactly.
So the the knowledge given to humans was given to humans before we were ready.
Exactly.
As I think it was Father Stephen DeYoung who used this analogy of like the tree of life, right? Like, why would God even put it there, right? It's the same thing as when a father says, well, good news, son. Here's this car I have for you that I like sort of spruced up for you. Now, when you're old enough, I'm gonna give you the keys, and you can use the car to drive.
Right.
But until you're old enough, the car stays in the garage. You're not to touch it. You're not to touch the keys, right?
Hmm.
Um, so it's um, So what Adam and Eve did were the equivalent of like a 7-year-old getting behind the wheel of that car and trying to go for
Exactly.
a ride. um, and we see that God is not
Did you get that
inherently.
analogy from Lord of Spirits?
I believe so. Yeah,
That's what I thought.
I think so. Yeah. And we know that God, and this is something that I got from like an insight I got from Jonathan Pajot, which was he he's like, oh, how do you know that God would have given them access to the tree of knowledge eventually? Isn't that just sort of just an interpolation? Well, no, it's not explicitly stated, but you have hints of it in scripture.
Right.
A good example of this that Pajot points out is when Solomon, as a newly crowned king, he's, feels intimidated by the responsibility resting on his shoulders, and he asks God to give him wisdom, like give him, great wisdom so that he can run his kingdom with,
Right.
you know, wisely. And God is overjoyed. God says like, okay, because you're so humble, because you asked for something so selfless and so, down to earth, instead of victory over your enemies or riches or whatever, I'm going to give you what you asked for plus all those other things you didn't ask for.
Exactly.
Um, and so Solomon runs, at least in his early reign, runs his kingdom with wisdom. Um, so when someone comes to God and humbly asks for wisdom and knowledge, God gladly obliges. So it's not that Adam and Eve took the knowledge when they were like took knowledge when they weren't supposed to have knowledge. It's that they took it before they were ready for it.
Exactly.
And that's essentially the sort of thing we live in, where we live in a modern society that's so based on usury, based on exploitation, based on all the things. And it's like, and it is, and to a certain degree, lifestyle is for, more people than in the past, easier than it was in the past, in the sense of like, your average person. Um, Instead of living in a hovel, could live in a house with air conditioning and a working toilet and
Right.
hot water and all that. Things that were once available only to the wealthy. But it's like, but do we stop there? I would say no, because it's like, okay, maybe we can, in the context of this fallen world, we sort of see the the way our society is structured as maybe like the best out of a bad situation in some respects.
Right.
But I think that was only true for a time. Now that we sort of have the modern technology, that's the fruit of that. It's like, um, okay, where do we go from here? And here is where okay, you know what? I'm gonna leave that for a minute because I'm gonna use that as my as like a little bit of a teaser for a project I'm working on with a friend for how to.
Ooh, I like it.
Okay, so right, so before I get to that, the question is like, okay, so how do we? And this is something that I've been meditating on because I was listening to the whole Council of God yesterday, where Father Stephen DeYoung was talking about the Torah, and they were talking about the laws regarding theft and usury, and and he said, there are sort of two extremes. One extreme is like, oh well, our society, since it's so deeply rooted in usury and some degree or other of exploitation, given the extenuating circumstances, it's not a sin like it used to be. Circumstances have changed that make it no longer a sin, and that's not right. It's a
Right.
it's a sin and always will be a sin. But then you have the people on the other extreme who try to be like, who are what I call the keyboard ortho bros, who are like, who live chronically online and don't have a experience of the real world. And so, like maybe they don't have a family to feed, maybe they don't have like a business that they need to run or whatever, and they're like sanctimonious, like, oh, it's always a sin, so like you need to stop doing it, like every sort of form of participation in this usurious economy all together and like I don't know, move to a mountain somewhere, and it's like, yeah, clearly you don't have a family or something, or
Right?
you, right? So it's like there is such a thing as real life, you know.
Right.
So it's like, what is the faithful Christian to do? The best we can do, at least at this point in time, is avoid it as much as we can within reasonable means. So
Right.
if you lend somebody money, or don't even lend money, give money freely, don't expect it back.
Exactly.
Um, if you have a business that's inherently rooted in exploitation, maybe start thinking about taking a different direction in business. Maybe start using some of the funds from that business to, I don't know, like invest in a restaurant or something more wholesome. Like if you're a tax guy for the IRS or something, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
like I don't know, if you make a decent amount of money, start investing that into possibly a gradual transition to a more wholesome livelihood.
Exactly.
There are things that the faithful Christian in this modern age can do to at least mitigate our participation in, um, like we can, even though we live in Babylon, we can at least try to live as much as possible like we're in Jerusalem.
That's right. If
And
I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my tongue be cut out and removed from me, because that's the point of that verse, is not literally, and obviously everybody, oh my goodness, this verse is so terrible, it talks about killing babies. Well, actually, it doesn't. It says little ones, blessed are those who bash your little ones against the stone. The little ones is actually little idols that they had in their windows. So blessed am I when I take your false gods and shatter them. That's what that verse actually means. But the reason why they're saying, if I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand be forgotten, cut off from me. If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my tongue be cut out. It's not literally um like I want to never speak again if I have a senior moment about Jerusalem. It's I if I forget to live like I did in Jerusalem, if I forget the life of God, let me die. And that let that be our prayer. If I forget to live life in light of God's kingdom, let me die. If I start living like a capitalist robber baron, let me die. If I start living like a socialist proletariat, let me die. Let me die before I forsake what God has commanded. And that's the thing is, yes, we might live in the 21st century, but let's not forsake the ways of God just because they're more difficult to pursue in this era. Instead, let us live like Jerusalem. Like you said, I love that so much. Anyway, sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead.
no, 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 not at all. I'm glad you chimed in. Um, and so to sort of take that one step further, another thing that I advocate, and I sort of say this as somebody who no longer permanently lives in the West. Like I'm in California right now. I have been for the last 6 months visiting family, going to weddings and other family events. But I actually, as I might have mentioned in a previous episode, I live in Armenia. Um,
Boost.
I'm I uh, I actually moved in 2023, um, because after the war with Azerbaijan, I wanted to like try to help the country as much as I could. Um, so up until recently, I've been living in Yerevan, the capital, because I had been trying to find work there and it hadn't been working out. So since I can't find a job anyway, I'm gonna try to do a combination of remote work and teaching English in schools
Nice.
to make enough of an income to survive in a sort of agrarian society. Because yeah, I'm gonna be teaching English and doing these things in one of the villages. So and it's actually kind of cool that there's a village in the north of Armenia that's like sort of the first of many, God willing, smart villages,
Oh,
where it's
wow.
yeah, where it's like a small, intimate village of like of I think like maybe 1,000 people or something at most. But guess what? They've installed fiber optic internet.
Bro, that's awesome.
And just recently, like last year, they modernized and updated the plumbing because they got tired of waiting for the stupid, shitty post-Soviet bureaucracy to get around to it. So they sort of started crowdfunding it, and they themselves started the process. And then when the government saw them taking the initiative, the government finally got around to helping them. But yeah, so they've put in modern plumbing, they put in modern internet. They're going to build a call center to allow the villagers to do some remote work for some Russian companies. Um, and
Based.
yeah, and this brings me to what I was going to say, what I kind of teased. There's a book that I'm working on with a friend of mine, um, that we're still working on the name, but the whole premise is that the city has served its purpose in history and now it needs to die because it's redundant in an age of modern technology. And essentially, what we're advocating is living a rural lifestyle with some of the comforts of the city, but not in excess. So so there doesn't have to be this dichotomy between the excitement of the city with like pubs and like bowling alleys and all these things. Meanwhile, like being out in the boonies where it's like dead and rinky dink and maybe if you're lucky you can pass time, watching a movie or like playing a game of soccer or something. Like it doesn't have the village doesn't have to be boring. And essentially, what we're advocating for is like compacted little communities
Hmm.
that are decentralized, very spread out, and um, and essentially a deurbanization, a gradual deurbanization, where the village isn't just full of farmers. It's full of remote workers that work for like IT firms, but
Yes.
out in nature. Um, and in terms of leisure activities, the village can be upgraded with, like you could have one village that has like a bowling alley and an arcade for like the young people to hang out at. It,
Right.
it you know, it, another village could have like some pubs or whatever. And so you almost have like these localized economies where it's like you're living in one village, right? But then you have like another village up the road where there's like card games with the guys on Friday night. So you get in the
Right.
truck, drive up the road, and you hang out at the pub for a few hours or something. You know what I mean? You don't have to go into town in order for there to be like a social life. Um,
That's awesome.
yeah. So the whole premise of our book is that um, that even like because of technology, we're basically sort of treating the urbanization as like a transitional period where it's like, okay, in order for us to sort of enjoy a more comfortable lifestyle, one could make the argument that maybe in the grand scheme of things, of human history, the industrial revolution was necessary. But now that we have the technology, now that your average person is capable of getting plumbing and run hot and cold running water and electricity and internet and all these things, we don't need the city anymore, especially because we live in a digital age. So much of what's done in the what are you going into a big office building for commuting every day? You could do that at home, right?
Right.
Or if you have like a manufacturing plant that makes um, whatever, right? Like you have a factory, you can you can ship that out to the boonies. It doesn't have to all be concentrated into this claustrophobic, polluted hellscape we call the city.
Exactly. No, this is awesome. I really want you to when you have this book ready to tell me about it and I'll buy a copy because I have been arguing this for years that like we need to de-urbanize, we need to um that the city itself is not I don't actually think it was ever a good thing, but I agree with you that it's sort of it's been something that's just sort of a function of the modern world for so long, that it's been kind of impossible to break free of, but it doesn't have to be anymore. We actually do have the ability to break free in so
of it.
many ways.
Yeah,
Um,
and in such a way that everybody, living in this rural society doesn't have to be a farmer. You could have
right,
you could have one guy working in an engineering firm. You could have another guy that's a lawyer who settles disputes. Like,
but you
it doesn't
could
have
be
to
a
be.
farmer.
But you could, yeah, if you want, you could be a farmer, you could be a rancher, whatever. But yeah, so you sort of have the opportunity. We're at a point in human history where we have the opportunity to sort of have the best of both worlds if we
Exactly.
work towards it. And even the city, right, is redeemable because you have, what do you have in the visions of Revelation? You have the New Jerusalem, which is portrayed as this massive, massive city, but
Right.
not that's toxic or exploitative. So even the city is redeemed by God. So you sort of, like the history of salvation history, right, is like a an ongoing list of instances where some God takes something that humans do and sort of redeems it for the good. So I feel like the Bible sort of leaves it ambiguous as to whether humans started doing animal sacrifice or if God instituted it from the beginning. Like who made that first move? But God,
Right.
whoever made the first move, God or humans, God used that as a means of atonement. He sanctified the blood of animals to be efficacious for atonement.
Right.
Um, he he took a grievous thing like warfare, right, and used it for his own ends. Like God did not intend warfare, but warfare exists, so God basically made the best out of
Right.
that bad situation.
Gigantomachy.
Yeah, exactly. And while still acknowledging that it is inherently sinful, that's why the Israelites, even if they were fighting a war in the name of the Lord, after they came back to the camp, they couldn't enter the camp for 7 days because they had to purify themselves. They were tainted by the blood they shed.
That's
And that
right.
was both a ritual impurity and a moral impurity. Um,
Exactly.
and so the city is the same way that here you have something that was established out of evil. Cain couldn't farm, so he essentially founded a city where you can get wealthy and like live off the labor of others. Um, but God takes the concept of the city, this crowded, noisy den of vices, and turns it into something good. David captures Jerusalem. I
Right.
can't remember, I correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think God even asked David to make Jerusalem the capital of his kingdom, but he did.
I
Uh,
think God actually does tell David to make, if I'm not
oh, he did.
mistaken, I think God actually does tell David to make Jerusalem his capital.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can't remember if he did or not, but
I
yeah.
don't
So,
remember like a specific verse, but I feel like I remember
mm,
that when David conquers the Jebusites, God says that this shall be um the sort of um he doesn't use the word capital, but it's like this is the center of what's happening.
right. Okay. If that's the case, then. But yeah. So either way, you still have the same concepts. A city captured from the Jebusites that is then made like the navel of the earth with
Right,
with the Temple Mount. And you see this again and again, and then going forward into the history of the church, right? You have the church sanctifying formerly pagan practices. Obviously, you can't sanctify
right.
anything, but those that can be salvaged are salvaged and
Exactly.
turned towards the good. Like, like in the Armenian church, obviously because Christ is the once for all sacrifice, we don't have any sacrifices for sins, but we do have this thing called a matav, which is essentially like a thank offering. So like let's say your dad was in a hospital and you prayed and and he was healed, right? He
Right.
survived. Out of thanks for God, you would go have a lamb slain, or a chicken or something, or a series of chickens. It's optional, and you would then give that meat to the poor.
That's awesome.
Um, and and once a year during the spring, there's like a bonfire thing that we do in Armenia where kind of in old Indo-European style we jump over the fire.
Oh
Like,
yeah. Just like Calpurgisnacht. Ivan Calpurgisnacht.
oh, okay. Is which is oh, that's Germanic, right?
It's well, sort of. Calpurgisnacht was a Germanic festival to a false god, but or sorry, not Calpurgisnacht, Kampalas Ivan Kampalasnacht is a it
Mhm.
was a Germanic festival in Eastern Europe, but
Mhm.
it got co-opted by the church. So now during the feast of Saint John the Baptist or Saint Ivan in Russian,
Mhm.
they build a bonfire and they jump over it. Um, the sexual elements of worshiping Calpurgus are all gone, but so they're not naked when they're jumping over the fire anymore.
Yeah.
But it was but they do this, and it's been co-opted into the festival of Saint John or Saint Ivan, and they call it Ivan Kampalasnat.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah, so it's sort of like a pan Indo-European thing then, because the Iranians also do it on Nowruz. So
Yeah,
um so it's so yeah, so here we have the ritual, like the form of the ritual taken and transmitted to something good and holy. In the Armenian context, I believe it's couples that do it, and it's sort of done like the fire is supposed to represent the trials that the couple go through together. So whereas in the past it was like, okay, jumping over the fire in order to like get fertility, right? It was like sort of fertility.
right.
Now it's like, okay, the couple has been wedded, and they're living a life in Christ. They're like a mini church in the home, and they have to go through trials. So like them jumping over the fire is sort of like reaffirming their commitments to go through the fire of life together.
Yeah,
So the so this is yet another example of something that humans made a mess of, that God then sort of takes and moves to the good. So um, I think the best way that Christians can sort of do this in the modern age is to start Christian, like Catholic or Orthodox or whatever, communes, like
yeah.
villages. There are already some of them. Like I believe there's an Eastern Orthodox one in Virginia.
Yeah, there's a Roman Catholic one that a lot of people don't know this, but in Florida, the guy who owns Domino's Pizza is actually a super intense Catholic, and he purchased a whole bunch of land and built a village that's basically like a Christian village in this town in Florida. I think it's called Ave Maria or something like that, but it's
Oh wow.
the whole town centers it, and it's built like a medieval village where like the cathedral is in the middle of town and then everything is built around it. Super based, like
Impressive.
yeah, if I was Roman Catholic, I'd 100% move there. Um but I'm not.
Yeah.
But there's a couple Eastern Orthodox ones too. One of them was established in like the 1800s by Protestants, but in modern or not modern, but in the last few years, like last few decades, the entire town converted to Eastern Orthodoxy, and so now it's just sort of inadvertently become one of these
Mm.
Orthodox towns. It's super based, but
There's one. I wonder if it's the Western Rite one, because there's this one Western Rite Orthodox church that I heard about where it's like a whole community around that church, and it's in Virginia.
oh, that's so awesome. I love that.
Um,
But we need
yeah,
more of these. We need more.
yeah.
So this is a good point, actually. So if you're already, let's say that you're already a wealthy Orthodox Christian. I know of at least one Greek gentleman who's a billionaire. I won't say his name, to protect the guilty, but no, I'm just kidding, brother. I'm just kidding. But but if it so we're basically sitting here saying you shouldn't be wealthy. So if you're already wealthy and you're like, well, what am I supposed to do with this? Buy land and do what this Domino's guy did. Buy land and make an Orthodox Christian community. Give back to the poor. Do what Zacchaeus did. Zacchaeus, he was wealthy, ill-gotten gain even. And Jesus doesn't say, nope, you can't repent. Nope, you can't come to me. No, Jesus accepts Zacchaeus. And then Zacchaeus, of his own free will, says, well, I'm going to give back everything I've taken. I'm going to. You have the opportunity to do that same thing. If you're an Orthodox Christian and you're wealthy, I encourage you, do that. Give back. Give of all that you have to the poor, and be this, do this, give back to society, give back to the poor, give back to your church, and build something that will outlive you. Don't hoard wealth to yourself, but build something great. Elon Musk, if you're watching, donate $1 billion to Freed Indeed Ministries using the link in the description below right now. And then I'll take back what I said earlier about not being an Elon fan.
Oh man. How did I not see that coming? Oh wait.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
I,
I
I don't
need
know I
to.
don't know if you caught what I did there.
I did, I did.
Oh.
Oh, yeah, you don't see a lot of things coming, do you? That's okay. I heard a funny joke the other day. It was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was wondering why the frisbee kept getting bigger, and then it hit her. Um, Sorry, Alexandria, if you're watching, we love you. We hope that you'll come to know the Lord. You were raised Catholic and you've strayed away. But in all seriousness, I realize that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is not watching this. I'm not arrogant enough to think she is.
Yeah.
Or anybody famous. I know Elon isn't watching this. But in all seriousness, like if you are a socialist and you're watching this, I want you to comment and tell me why you're a socialist. If you're watching this and you still believe in capitalism, tell me why. In the
Yeah.
comments below, I want to hear from you guys.
And,
Um,
and
but
and I think
also, like,
oh,
if you are a socialist, I just want you to realize that you don't have to like choose between being compassionate to the poor and being, and believing biblical economics. Biblical economics are actually more compassionate to the poor than socialism is. And you don't have to choose between socialism and capitalism. That is a false dichotomy that has been pushed onto us. But we don't have to choose between those two things. We can actually reject both of those and embrace what the Bible has for us.
right. And I would say like when you sort of take the moral or ethical conservatism of the right and combine it with the sort of economic policies of the left to a degree, right?
Yeah,
If the left throughout its degeneracy and the right throughout its like callous,
capitalism.
capitalism, you put the good sides of both of them together, you have something very close to a biblical ethic.
Exactly.
It's that's why and that's why beginning of the episode we said the Bible would piss off both sides of the political spectrum
Exactly.
because it's like you know you it's sort of because here's the funny thing, both the uber capitalists and uber socialists employ a sort of collectivism, or sorry, employ a certain hyper individualism of a different
That's
kind.
right.
The capitalists want financial individualism, and like, oh, I can do whatever I want with my money and private property and all that, and you can't take my wealth away from me.
Right.
And then and then you have the socialists who want a collective society financially, where you're not just an independent agent. You're a certain amount of your income has to go to the welfare of those who are less fortunate, which is good. But then it's like, oh, but it's my body, my choice, and I can do whatever I want.
Right.
Chop my dick off. I can chop my dick off, and all that. And it's like no, neither is true. Capital to the capitalists on the right, no, private. If you are okay, if you're secular Republican, then I don't know what to say to you. You're just a libertarian at that point. But if you are a professing Christian Republican who claims to try to live by the gospel, um, no, your private property is not inherently your own.
That's right.
In fact, you're a thief if you have,
Mm-hmm.
if you have like 10 pairs of shoes, and there's a homeless guy down the street that has none, and you're refusing to give him even one of your pairs. You're a thief.
That's right.
So, so so the Bible rejects the financial individualism of the right, but then it rejects the ethical individualism of the left that says, I have, I can do whatever I want with my body because my body is mine and mine alone. And it's
Right.
like, to both husbands and wives, no, it's not your own. If you're a woman, if you're a man, your body belongs to your spouse.
That's right.
It belongs first and foremost to the Lord, and second, it belongs to your significant other. It's not yours. And no, like you know, if you profess to believe in the gospel at all, no, it doesn't belong to you. Um,
Exactly.
so, and that's so in many ways, it's almost like a type of hyper collectivism, because you don't get you
That's
don't
right.
get
It is.
you don't get either the financial individualism or the bodily individualism. You get neither. Your money belongs to everyone, and your body belongs to your significant other and God.
That's right.
So,
And everything belongs to God, exactly.
like,
So, I
Christianity,
do.
Christianity for the
That's
win,
that's right.
ruining everybody's day.
Christianity, brethren, rise up. Um, so I have to close out so that I can
Yeah, yeah,
go get my next counseling session and bring them up to my office. But do you
yeah.
have any or were those your closing thoughts, or do you have any additional closing thoughts?
I think that was my closing. As the
Perfect.
Podfathers would say, that's what I have to say about that.
Perfect. Well, I'm actually pretty content with everything you just said. I would just say, like, again, um, we've been kind of in jest and in good humor, we've been saying that the Bible pisses off both the left and the right. But I also would just like to say that in another sense, both the left and the right are keying in on certain biblical themes without the full picture. So if you're a socialist or whatever, then I don't want you to come away from this with the thought of like, um, oh, these guys showed that I can't be a Christian. No, lots of the things you value actually are find their fullest expression in Christianity. If you're a capitalist, lots of the things you value and are looking for actually find their fullest expression in Christianity. So I don't want you, whether you're a capitalist, socialist, or whatever else,
Or
um,
okay, maybe not capitalist, but if you're a Republican Christian who is like trying
right,
to
right.
harmonize,
If
like, uh
Yeah, if you're
capitalism.
right wing or left wing, if you
Yeah.
have any of these things, I don't want you to come away from this with the sense that like we're bashing you on the head with the Bible. What I want you to come away from this with the sense of, in all honesty, is that the fullness of what of the good that you're seeking is not found in a political system. It's not found in a political party. It's found in the Lord Jesus Christ and in what He has established, and we can bring that to fruition in our individual lives first and foremost, and then spread it out into the world like the germ of wheat that germifies the whole lump of dough. We can be that in society. And so my urging to you is, come and see. Come to the Orthodox Church, experience the divine liturgy, and experience what God purposes for you. Come and have that experience, and
Mhm.
then go out from that to see what God offers to you um, in Christ. So that's what I'm urging everybody to do. And thank you so much for watching. Please do share this with your friends, especially your friends who are Republicans or Democrats, um, and so that they too can be freed indeed. God bless.
God bless.